Welcome to Malpractice Podcast.
So, are you ready to get started?
Yes, I am. Let's do this.
I like saying it, but I always get scared
You get
every
scared
time.
to kick it off.
Yeah.
You're like, you don't want to be the first
I
one to
don't,
talk.
which is
I
not
get that vibe.
It is unlike me, but it is real.
Correct. I'm Sydney,
And I'm Jess.
and this is Malpractice Podcast.
It is. Welcome.
And we're here in the morning.
Malpractice in the morning.
Yeah. We love a morning record, I ain't gonna lie.
We really do.
I feel like we're just on in the morning.
I don't have coffee. I haven't had caffeine yet. So we're going to see what's going on.
Explain my face.
She's like open. She's shocked.
Jaws dropped.
It's like,
I've never
it is
been
wild.
around Jess when she's not drinking coffee, I think. And I've known her since she was 4, so.
That's hilarious. And true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was so fun giving each other's maid of honor speeches
Mhm.
at weddings because we were like, we've known each other for over 25 years.
How long has everyone
So-
in this room known Jess? Because I've known her longer.
Nearly you were there at my birth.
With the exception of literally your
Yeah,
parents. Yeah.
So
This is awkward.
when I tell people about the podcast, actually, and I say, oh, I do it with my best friend, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, we've known each other for like
Yeah.
now, like 26
Hey.
years. And they're like, holy
Holy
shit.
shit.
And I'm like, yeah, that's a long time
Yes.
to authentically be friends with someone.
It's a really long time.
And actually, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if this, I mean, whatever, uncaffeinated.
Yeah.
This is a wild ride for me, but have we ever had like a fight? I don't think
We had
so.
a fight when we were in Japan.
That wasn't a fight. I was just a bitch. I was just, listen, middle school Jess it's not my best time. If it's anyone's best time, you're a bitch. Like, because
But this is how Jess fights with you. Jess.
I'm so scared. Don't out me.
Jess will get really, like, her arguments are high level. And so she gets really analytical with, like, why she's fighting with you.
Yeah.
You wanna break it down to the root cause of, like, are you actually mad about this, or is it this other thing that you're mad about and you're taking it out on this other thing? And I'm like, okay, fair enough. But the other thing that Jess said to me the one time we did have a fight is that crying was not my thing.
Look, listen, I think I was just lashing out because I was really ugly in middle school. And I'm going to be super honest with everyone because I have nothing to hold me back, no chemicals in my body right now.
You were not.
I
Yeah.
really had a rough time existing 5th through 8th grade.
Fair.
Like, I was not cute. I had like wire rimmed glasses.
Mm-mm.
One year in our middle school, what is that, yearbook,
Yeah.
I had the same sweatshirt on in every photo I was in that
Was
yearbook.
it a green Michigan sweatshirt?
No, that was the next year. It was a
Okay.
purple SFA
Okay.
sweatshirt. Literally talked to my parents about it when I was like in college. I'm like,
Right.
I wore that sweatshirt. They let me wear, I swear to
A
God,
whole year.
flip-flops and toe socks.
Oh.
I really was not.
Oh, that's
It was
harsh.
but I thought, I don't give a fuck. I was like a nerd. I had like a rolly backpack.
You have never cared, let's be clear, about
Okay, but I care now.
well, you have to care now.
I
A
care
little bit.
now. The glow up, there's a song that says that, like, you
Mhm.
peaked in high school, I'm still out here getting cuter. Thank God, because
In high school, it feels like
yeah, no.
it's the end, right? Like it feels like this is what I look like and I'm going to look like this forever. And it gets better. If you're like a high school student, first of all, why are you listening to this? Go to bed.
Oh, no, you should listen. We'll teach you things.
Okay, fine.
I sometimes miss teaching high school students.
Wait, can I tell you about something about like children and students while we're on the topic? I'm so late to this party.
Yeah.
Do you know the soccer team Roma?
I mean, sounds familiar.
Okay. So Jess and I played soccer for forever.
For nearly as long as we've known each other.
Correct. The soccer team Roma in 2019 started doing this thing where every time they announced a player transfer or a new player signing on, they posted the guy's photo with a picture of a missing child They have solved 12 missing children cases. Like, they found 12 missing children.
Oh my God.
Isn't that so cool?
That's really cool.
So apparently they've been doing it for like two or 3 years, but they've solved like 12 cases that way.
Shout out.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Oh, it just gave me chills. I was listening to a different podcast this morning and they were talking about it. I was like, first of all, they deserve another shout out because that's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. That is really cool. That's like way to use your platform.
Yo, absolutely.
We love that.
Yeah.
This is a terrible transition.
We don't need transitions.
I'm almost done with Invisalign if you've been on the journey with me, and I'm so excited.
I'm almost done giving a shit that we don't ever have transitions.
Yeah.
We just have a list of things that we want to talk about every time, and we're going to go down that list and join us for the ride, or skip this part, because some people do.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yeah, skippers, do your thing. Whatever. This is also not a transition. We went to brunch this weekend, and I want you to verify for me how mad I should be at Eric.
Okay.
Tell me if I should fire him.
Okay.
So our cats eat these cat snacks that are like it's like a cat Go-Gurt.
Yeah.
So like you squeeze up from the bottom. Right. Okay. So Eric gave our cats one of those, and then he put the rest of the cat Go-Gurt that was tuna flavored in his back pocket, and then he sat down on the couch.
Yeah, you should be mad.
So tuna paste,
Yeah.
tuna cat Go-Gurt, he just sat in it for like probably an hour, and then he got up and I was like, oh my God, your butt smells horrifying. It smells like tuna. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he turns around and there's cat Go-Gurt just like in the size of his seat.
Eric, what?
He just smeared everywhere, tuna cat Go-Gurt everywhere into the couch, just like ground in.
Yeah, you should be mad.
How mad? Scale of 1 to 10.
8.
Okay. I felt like an 8, and he was like, I feel like you're being unreasonable. And I was like,
no.
Our couch smells like tuna fish forever now.
And tuna couch? And now the cats are just going to lick the couch.
Yeah, it's not a good thing that we have going on here.
100%. You can't just like do that. Michelle just brought me coffee.
That was so nice.
Literally a special delivery.
Special delivery.
My God.
How sweet. What a good wife.
Oh my God. I didn't even text her.
Very thoughtful.
I'm so happy.
Snaps for Michelle. Very thoughtful.
She's really the best.
She's great.
Let me tell you, that's the other thing I want to say to everyone who's ugly in middle school and who thinks they'll never find somebody. Listen, PSA, you will.
You will.
And then when you think you've hit your peak and people try and tell you there's better, believe them. Because you'll randomly meet them on Bumble swiping right one time and they'll bring you coffee as you record.
Yeah, years down the road, they'll bring you coffee.
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
Oh my, I heard her making one and I was like, I don't have a coffee. She's making it for
That's so
me.
sweet. No, that was so
cry.
nice. All right. You're caffeinated. You ready?
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. So this was a topic Sydney and I had on the list for a while.
Yeah.
This episode, we are covering body farms. If you're anything like us, you could be like me and be like, what is that? Or you could be like Sydney and be like, this is incredibly cool and I want a vacation there.
Would I go to a body farm? Absolutely, positively.
Yeah, you would.
I would go tomorrow.
Yeah. So a body farm is much more than what it sounds. Because when I heard it, I was like, farming for what now? What are you talking about? And I actually heard about it when I was in college. Spoiler alert, Sam Houston State University, Emo Cats, has a body farm. So I knew about it. But when I heard about it, I was like, that's disgusting. But it's actually incredibly cool. It's a research facility where decomposition of humans and other animals can be studied in a variety of settings in order to gain like a better understanding of decomp for criminal investigations, but also to advise medical and scientific research. So it's pretty weird and also pretty cool.
100%.
So we've touched on grave robbing for medical study before, and that's like what the alternative was in science for research in this space before body farms. Yeah. People grave robbing and then selling bodies to like medical institutions. Like we've touched on that in an episode.
Yeah, I just did a really good episode on it. I think it's called Burke and Hare from season 2 or 3.
Yes.
If you haven't heard that, definitely go check that episode out. That was one of my favorite episodes we've ever done, I think. You did such a good job with that one.
I thought it was such a weird episode, but that's what they would do. to get the research done.
Yeah.
But now we don't have to do that. Thank goodness. The first idea for a body farm actually came from the anthropologist William M. Bass, and it came to him around 1972. He was at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, but he didn't call it a body farm. He called it just a research facility. And it didn't get off the ground really until 1981, and it was finally established and funded, and everything was put together.
Yeah.
The name Body Farm came from a crime thriller by Patricia Cornwell called The Body Farm, which was released in 1995. So the name actually came from a sci-fi.
Which is so interesting.
And I think that's actually probably the best thing, because at the time, calling it a body farm, I think Bass wouldn't have gotten the support.
Exactly.
But calling it a research facility, people want to fund research. That's great. Getting the name and making it popularized through pop culture, that's the way to go.
Agreed.
So Bass was interested in studying the decomposition of a human to better understand the process, and this would allow the understanding of techniques for extracting information like time of death, circumstances around death from human remains, and how the environment reacts when human remains are there, which ends up being a specific area of study. So very cool.
Super interesting. And I think with 2022 scope, we can look at this and objectively see that it's important and it's interesting, and true crime is pretty popular now.
Right.
But in the 80s when this started, there were some very specific attitudes about death and dying in humans that not everybody was on board with this.
Right.
Body farms are particularly interesting to fields like forensic anthropology, law enforcement, forensic science. Now, if you're not 100% sure what we're talking about, if we haven't made that super clear yet, body farms are these research facilities where, as morbid as it might sound, human bodies are basically just laid out in different conditions. They might be left out in the elements to essentially decompose while scientists observe the process. So researchers are coming in, they're taking pictures, they're taking measurements, they're keeping a lab notebook of everything they see. So whether that's helping solve homicide investigations or investigating genocides is one of the things they said this is an application for.
Yep.
Anytime they're looking into how, when, and where a person died, they might call on these body farms. Let's take it back to 1977, before this all started. William Bass, our dude from before, is a forensic anthropologist, and he gets a call. Police are telling him they found a body that had been dumped into what looked like a recently disturbed grave, and they wanted Bass to do a consultation as an expert in the field and try to determine the man's time of death with the goal of figuring out who he was and what happened to him, which is always the goal of homicide investigations, right?
Right, yeah. So police had noticed that the Civil War era grave of Colonel William Shy had been recently disturbed, and they found that the corpse inside looked surprisingly fresh, which, ew, oh my God, why would you
How dare
ever
you,
disturb?
yeah.
The audacity to disturb a grave, I find that so offensive.
I do too.
I don't even like walking in a graveyard. That is such a, you don't do that.
Right.
Don't do that. I don't know who's listening to this and doing that, but you stop it right now.
Don't rub a grave. We told you about this.
Don't do it. So they were like, this grave has been disturbed. What the fuck? The police began to suspect that somebody had been recently murdered and then placed in this old grave in order to cover up the crime. So that would be a huge deal, obviously. And they called in the expert, and there comes Bass. But also police.
First of all,
okay, go ahead. Are you about to criticize the police?
yes, but also that would kind of be a genius idea.
Okay.
If they didn't know about this and you put a new body in an old grave and they didn't know what decomp looked like, I don't know.
My thought is is there a missing person? Why are you jumping straight to homicide?
So apparently I read a little bit more about this case, and they were saying that basically somebody was just walking past and saw that the grave had been disturbed because apparently an actual grave robber came through.
Oh, okay, got it.
And so somebody reported, this is an old grave, it's been disturbed, and the police were like, I guess we have to look into this.
Also, up the security. What's going on?
Right. Why is grave robbing even possible? And also, who would dare?
Who? Also, what are you getting from the grave?
Civil War memorabilia?
And then selling it where?
On the black market?
A black market.
I don't know
Who wants to
anything.
remember the Civil War? That's the most embarrassing situation.
Right.
Anyway, U.S. history aside, Bass noted that the body was like still pink,
Mm-hmm.
and he informed the police that he believed the Civil War era corpse had been swapped for a recent body.
Which is fair when you read about it because apparently they were like still intestines.
Yeah, no, it was like
it was intact.
intact.
It was still wearing gloves. The body was still wearing gloves. Okay, keep going.
He said it was an approximately 25 to 28-year-old man who had been dead less than a year. So this throws everybody off. Everybody's in a fit. My question, again, do not disturb graves. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, go fuck yourself.
Correct.
However, turns out Bass was wrong. Further analysis of this dead man's teeth and clothes showed that it was indeed 26-year-old William Shy.
Yeah.
His body had been preserved thanks to embalming and a really tightly sealed iron casket. So, like, great craftsmanship there. I mean, seriously, like, that's crazy.
That's weird, yeah.
Based on that, Bass was like, we need to study this for real. Like, I'm off by 100 years. Scientists don't love that.
No, I'm sure he was a little embarrassed and probably pretty annoyed that he was 100 years off. So basically, he's like, absolutely not. I hate being wrong, which same.
Yeah. Never happened to me, but I do hate it. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That was good. And from that moment on, he decided it was incredibly important to understand how different circumstances like burial methods and weather conditions actually affect human decomposition. Which, side note, how do you want to be buried?
Oh, I want to be cremated.
Okay, I have a thing for you at the end of this.
I told Michelle I want to be cremated because I have to die first because
Yeah.
I can't live without her. And then I want to be put in her casket.
That's so crazy.
That's really what I want.
That's the
though.
craziest thing I've ever heard.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Okay. I'll help you accomplish this if I'm still around,
Is
but
it
it is
crazy?
crazy. Oh, yeah.
Why? I love her.
I recently found out while we were doing this episode that body farm donation is apparently like way greener than traditional burial methods.
Oh, yeah.
Because cremation in the US alone produces 250,000 tons of carbon dioxide emissions each year.
Well, I don't want to be in the ground.
There's a whole industry behind this, but you can do this thing that they call human composting, and they can like make you into a tree, basically.
I don't want to do that.
I do. I think that's how I want to go.
I don't love that.
Yeah, compost me. Yeah, do it.
Immediately, no. First of all, no. You can't do that.
Put me under a tree like a banana peel.
I'm going to cremate you and hold you forever. Absolutely not. I'll be.
She's holding her cup of coffee up like you would put me in a coffee cup.
We would still hang out. I would be
Cup of coffee.
devastated. Eric would have to fight me.
But you could go like sit under the tree and be like, this is my friend.
No.
That would be cool.
People would think I was a psychopath.
You're holding a cup of my ashes in the other scenario.
Well, I would put you in like some jewelry.
That's not out of the question. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You could do that. Okay.
I'm keeping a piece of you at minimum.
Crazy.
Just so Eric is clear.
Just a finger. Just an ear.
I have to have something.
Fair enough.
Are you joking? The amount of times yesterday alone that I called you is like, I cannot.
We do talk all the time.
I do want to be cremated. I'm so sorry. Maybe they'll think of a greener way to
it'll
do
be
it,
fine.
but I do not want to be on the ground.
No, that's gross. I don't want to be buried for sure. And if anyone ever holds an open casket funeral for me, I will haunt you.
They're really, really hard.
They're not good. I don't like an open
to
casket.
see.
Don't do it.
I don't like it. Yeah.
So, beep boop bop. Before the advent of body farms, we're back on track from Tangent City. Just swerving right back on the road.
Oh, yeah.
Who knew?
Crazy.
So, before the advent of body farms in the early 1970s, forensic scientists consulting on criminal cases basically had to rely on research that was conducted largely on the carcasses of pigs. And even now, apparently many countries outside the US still utilize pig carcasses for that research, which isn't necessarily wrong because their bodies seem to react similarly to human bodies in the dying process, which is a little bit horrifying as someone who eats pork. Feels like it made me rethink that a lot.
Wouldn't know. Don't eat that.
Some people argue that pigs are only so useful in this context because of the fact that they don't die of the same causes or carry the same diseases as humans. So if you're trying to study like a gunshot wound, they're not euthanizing pigs with a gunshot wound, right? So it's hard to study the same effects.
Mm.
And that's one of the really important components of these body farms is that you can actually simulate a really specific environment where the body might be decomposing,
Right.
including the local flora and fauna that contribute to that decomp process. And we're going to get into all of that. But first, we want to talk about the fact that there are 7 body farms in the US, as well as some in Australia, Canada, and now the UK. And I read a couple articles. The UK was not down with this at first.
And honestly, I mean, I understand.
There's lots of pushback in the UK. Like when they started implementing these, there's lots of scientists coming out saying like why we don't need them. It's super interesting. So in the US, they are the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. This is the first one. West Carolina University. Texas State University has the Freeman Ranch, and it's actually the world's largest body farm. Sam Houston State University.
Eat 'em up, cats.
Just did a shivvy. That's her alma mater. Southern Illinois University, Colorado Mesa University, and the University of South Florida.
It's so funny I say eat 'em up, cats, because that's also Texas State University's like little slogan. They say the same
Oh,
thing.
is it really?
Mhm.
They stole the... Who stole it?
Probably us. I don't know.
Okay, whatever.
Even the FBI has seen the use of body farms. So
Yeah.
the U.S. Fort program uses the facility, it's in Tennessee, to train students and law enforcement to find burial grounds,
Yeah.
grave excavation, and outdoor crime scene processing. They also have like advanced training for mass grave excavation and human rights investigations should they be needed. So, like I said, I know it's crazy, but it's so good that the training's actually happening.
It's so necessary, yeah.
The FBI partner with the University of Tennessee for their lab's Recovery of Human Remains course. It's held in March every year.
Please let me go to that.
So they send personnel to the body farm, and they have done this like essentially since it started, to immerse themselves in research that will help them understand the complexity of the outdoor crime scenes they could find themselves in. The class has been going on 20 years. And it's a 5-day intensive that includes methodology of ground analysis, unearthing remains, and documentation. Think about like how much of this could be shown to a jury. So like every little thing matters in the documentation process and the scientific documentation. They're like getting that crash course and doing that super well. It's like archaeological vibes.
Yeah.
How they need to gather information.
With like paintbrushes, they're unearthing these things. It's crazy.
Yes. And it's totally beneficial to those who would need to be figuring out these crimes and holding people accountable. So the second part of the course includes like the intersection with their FBI work. So like communication with other teams, sharing of information, like it all kind of goes together. Donnie Wolf Stedman, the director of the Forensic Anthropology Center at the University of Tennessee, said, all of the research that we do here is to benefit law enforcement and to move forensic science forward in areas such as grave recognition and how to best excavate burials. And she goes on to say that the techniques that we are teaching are exactly how we hope they will approach every crime scene when they encounter buried remains. That's incredible, right? I think that's really great.
Yeah.
That they can get scientific training.
No, 100%.
Versus law enforcement training. Like, I think that's really important.
Yes. Especially if you are the crime scene tech, or you are the person who is like first on the scene, or you are the person whose job it is to excavate a body. It's so important that you handle it with such care because of the fact, like you were saying, a defense team is always trying to get their client off. And any wiggle room they have for you messed up, you did something incorrectly.
Yep.
That's always grounds for potentially getting someone off who did a horrendous thing, right? So you want these people to be the best of the best at what they do and handle it in a very scientific way. Before we talk about each of the facilities in the U.S., I just wanted to quickly cover some of what we know about the decomposition process, and most of it is from these body farms because Bass, I cannot overstate how much he revolutionized the field of forensics. So from the body farms, we now know that there are several stages of decomposition, and this is how they go. As soon as a person dies, within about 10 minutes, your body stops undergoing its normal metabolic processes. So for about 10 minutes after, it's still doing those things, which is crazy to me. And then right after that stops, your cells are undergoing this process called autophagy, where they start leaking fluid. And as they're leaking fluid, they're basically breaking open. Your cells are breaking open. And as they're doing that, they're leaking fluid, and the bacteria in and around your body start going to town. They want to eat the fluid coming out of your cells. As the bacteria consume the solids and liquids inside your body, they release gases, which causes the body to bloat within a few days of death.
Ugh.
During the bloat phase, the body can essentially swell to, they said, twice its previous size, so it gets really swollen. And I know that's like, woof.
Yeah.
While this is happening, the bacteria are producing this sulfur byproduct that gives the body a yellowish tint and also a wild smell, I'm sure. And researchers call this marbling. During this phase, they say, I'm sorry, this is really gross. They say it's almost like a rotten egg smell because that sulfur is really pungent.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick warning.
Yeah, skip ahead.
Yeah.
30 seconds if you don't want to hear gross stuff.
If you don't want to hear something gross, just go ahead and skip. From the marbling phase, depending on the local flora and fauna, small animals or insects like flies will basically arrive and lay eggs that will hatch into maggots that consume part of the body as the maggots grow. Apparently, researchers say that maggots tend to usually start with the face. I think it's because your eyes decompose fairly quickly, so they have these big orifices in your ears and eyes, nose, and mouth to basically go into.
Oh my God, this is so disgusting.
I know.
I wish I could skip ahead.
I know. I'm so sorry. Jess is like tense.
I'm like, this is really gross.
So what you have at this stage is basically a short, sort of like shriveled, mummified looking face on a swollen body, basically.
God, okay.
So at that point, we're just before 3 days. So then about 3 days after death, the body starts what they call the purge phase. And so it will essentially shrivel and the skin tightens and it will lose lots of nitrogen-rich fluids that can leave a dark spot on like the grass and soil or wherever the body is laid. And those nitrogen-rich fluids are some of the chemicals that like cadaver dogs might be looking for. So if a cadaver dog is looking for
Got it.
a 3-day post-death body, what they're looking for is that nitrogen-rich fluid. And then by 6 weeks post-death, most of the flesh will have been consumed by bacteria, maggots, flies, whatever's around locally, flora and fauna-wise. So you're basically left with bones, cartilage, and skin.
All right. Thanks for that ever so disgusting, descriptive.
I know. I'm so sorry.
Images that are now in my brain forever.
First thing in the morning, dead body pictures.
Yeah. Yikes.
So now we're going to get into the different facilities in the U.S. Where they study this process. So University of Tennessee is the original. As Jess mentioned, this was started by Dr. William M. Bass, who was named...
I don't know. I just feel like he deserves a little...
No, he seems really cool.
Yeah.
Especially I feel like to go on and found an entire center because you were wrong about one case is like respect.
Mm-hmm.
He was named the dean of the university's anthropology department in 1971. He was an official state forensic anthropologist for Tennessee and was often called in to consult for police cases involving the decomposition of human remains, which caused him to come up with the idea. It's a 2.5-acre wooded plot that is surrounded by a razor wire fence. Also, this is really cool. There has never been a case of someone trying to sneak on and do anything weird with the bodies on any of these
It's
sites.
really sad that we live in a world where we're like, it's great that people haven't come to disturb these bodies.
But they're really, really well protected. So
Yes.
I'm the type of person who would actually think about like donating my body to something like this. I think it would be really cool.
And I will never allow.
Right. It would give me peace of mind to know that they're well protected, I think. So the bodies here are exposed to different conditions. They settle throughout. They're left to decompose. Some of the conditions are they're like locked in the trunk of a car, submerged in water. Plus, some are just exposed to the general elements. The stages that you find them in are fresh, bloat, decay, and then dry stage. And then the last one is bones, obviously, which we already kind of talked about. They observe and record the whole decomposition process, and then basically scientists are responsible for analyzing and presenting their findings, right?
Yeah.
Over 100 bodies are donated to the facility every year, which is honestly a wild number. I'm so glad for them that people are doing that.
I'm sure they're all like scientists and like educated
Yeah.
people who are like, I want to give my body back.
Yeah.
You won't find me there.
No, you won't find Jess. You might find me depending.
I'm telling you right now, I will be the one case that sneaks onto a body farm to steal your
Steals
body
me.
back.
Oh my God.
Like a psychopath.
Crazy.
And I'm not kidding.
Jess is like, you see her mugshot. Old,
oh my God, I
hopefully.
hope I'm like 85 jumping over a barbed wire fence.
So some of the people who end up on this farm have donated their own bodies. Some were donated by families, which I think is kind of weird if you haven't had that conversation. And some by the medical examiner.
It's like unclaimed bodies, and I don't like that.
I don't think I know how I feel about that, but I
don't think that's
I love
right.
it.
I really, really, really don't like that. When I read that, I was like, I don't like that. Yeah. Immediately, I think it's really weird.
If you find the person with a note in their pocket that says, like, I want to be donated to Tennessee's body farm, that's one thing. If you don't, I feel like that should not be your default, maybe. I don't know.
I don't like it.
At the University of Tennessee alone, there have been 1,800 bodies donated so far, plus an additional 1,700 skeletons. So I don't know how that works separately, but apparently you can choose to donate like just your skeleton.
Also don't like that.
Right now they have a
really
list
weird.
of 4,000 people who have signed up to donate their bodies once they've, died. I want to be body farmed, I think.
You better hope I'm dead first, because I will literally go to jail. Stealing your body back.
I'd be like, Eric, do this, but don't tell Jess. She's going to be weird about it. Just give her some ashes from the fireplace.
First of all, I'm weird about it right now.
Fair.
I'm currently weird.
Yeah.
In 2020, the University of Tennessee was conducting experiments to determine whether or not the nutrients that are released by human remains could have an effect on the color of a tree's leaves, which I think is
so
really
interesting.
Really interesting. And if that turns out to be true, they can actually help in the search for missing persons, which, wow, right?
That's so cool.
The facility has also generated the William M. Bass Donated Skeletal Collection, which is the largest documented collection of contemporary American skeletons in the world, making it like authentically a scientific tourist area, which
so weird. Yeah.
is Sydney's like
it's my vibe.
Goal in life, probably.
Yeah.
Go and see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Not me. Okay. Now we're going to talk about Western Carolina University. This was the second facility opened in the U.S. as part of the Western Carolina Human Identification Laboratory. The director is Cheryl Johnston. I just want to shout out all the directors.
Yeah.
The facility is called the Forensic Osteology Research Station, or the Forest. That's cool.
That is cool.
It was opened in 2006, and the Forensic Anthropology program is like this rural plot of land in the mountain campus. So it's like a different kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
The focus here is the mountain habitat, and it's used for cadaver dog training.
That's so cool.
So this is a really focused area. It's done twice a year, and it's among very few programs to offer this. So that's cool. That's like their kind of claim to fame is the cadaver dog training.
Yeah.
In that mountainous area.
Yeah. And part of the thing that I feel like you'll notice as we talk about each of the different body farms is that they're spread all over the United States. And there's a really good reason for that, which is that under different climate conditions, bodies decompose differently.
Yes.
The soil is different, the habitat is different, the local flora and fauna are different, and all of those things are going to affect how the body decomposes, which is why you have such a wide range of like where these places are located. So cool.
Yeah. So Texas State University is the third. It's under the direction of Daniel West. This is part of the Forensic Anthropology Center of at Texas State.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, before the location was selected, local residents were like, no, I don't know about this. And their real issue was like,
Yeah.
if you have a body farm here, there's going to be vultures circling.
Which is fair.
Like, I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
And they actually like stalled the plan for the creation until they felt comfortable. I don't know how they made them feel comfortable. Maybe they were like, we'll move it further away.
It's in a pretty rural area, but
it is fair though. That is,
I get it.
Yeah. So February 12th, 2008, they announced the Freeman Ranch off of County Road 213 northwest of San Marcos. And that's the site of the facility. The vultures came. They're there. But they were now adding an additional area of decomposition study. So like how animals kind of like, and specifically vultures, will impact the body as it decomposes.
Yeah, exactly.
A new body is brought there about every 5 to 6 months from Texas hospitals, funeral homes, or medical examiner's office.
Mm-hmm.
They are loaded into cargo vans and brought to the ranch. The space is used by law enforcement and forensic investigations throughout Texas and the nation, as well as the students, obviously. This Forensic Anthropology Center accepts body donations for scientific research under the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, so you can, like, dedicate your body that way.
Mm-hmm.
They have received just over 150 bodies so far, and there's 200 more donations planned, so...
Yeah.
This specific space focuses on reconstructing post-mortem intervals to determine time since death, plus training law enforcement for things like search and rescue, and cadaver dogs is another area that they do cadaver dog training to find remains. Their research is rooted in focusing on the interaction among species in the ecosystem where a body is located.
Yeah, and as morbid as it sounds, like vultures are a part of that species ecosystem. What I read is basically they have this, it's called like a necro food chain. So basically it's like bacteria eat your body, something eats the bacteria, mice come in and eat the insects that eat the bacteria, snakes come in and eat the mice, vultures come in and eat the snakes. Like there's a whole process
Yeah.
of kind of a tiered hierarchy of the different species that would interact with your body if you died like out in the open, which is very weird and interesting. So just to describe a little about how the process works, Vox actually visited Texas State and they said this about the process. First, the researchers take like measurements and photographs. They take blood and hair samples when the body arrives. Then they assign the body an identifying number. Basically, they give it like a toe tag. They bring it out to the grounds and place it in a specific spot, at least a few feet away from any other nearby bodies, so there's not overlap. At any one time, there are about 50 bodies laying out. So researchers put those numbered bodies in a specific spot. Sometimes they're naked. Sometimes they're wearing a specific item of clothing. Sometimes they're wrapped in a tarp, which can actually accelerate the decomposition process, interestingly enough. Sometimes they're in the sun, maybe the shade. They might be in high grass, or sometimes they're under a kind of metal cage to prevent things like buzzards and vultures from interfering with their work. Sometimes they're looking to see how local animals interact with the decaying body, like we talked about. So they're left out in the open. If they're trying to replicate a real live homicide case, they might put the bodies in a specific environment, like a water tank, a car trunk, tied to a tree, like something that actually happened. And all of those things feel like really horrifying possibilities. But I think when you reframe it to think about the fact that they're doing this in an attempt usually to catch a horrible person who would do this to another human being, I think it makes it a lot more palatable.
Absolutely, yeah. The next facility is at Sam Houston State University. Eat 'em up, cats. Major shout out to my alma mater. It's called the Southeast Texas Applied Forensic Science Facility. It is a research and training facility of forensic science disciplines and crime scene and criminal activities. It makes sense because SHSU is a huge school for criminal justice. It's like a criminal justice place.
Right.
Therefore, their studies have centered around the application of forensic science to the human body and evidence that can be taken from them, as well as they focus on bugs, barnacles, and scavengers at the specific facility.
Mm-hmm.
This place is recognized by the Anatomical Board of Texas and accepts human body donations as well.
Yeah.
It's located within the Center for Biological Field Studies. It's a 247-acre piece of land close to Sam Houston National Forest, so Sydney could technically try and go visit.
Mm-hmm.
It's very close.
Super close.
This space has 1 acre of maximum security fencing with an additional 8 acres of minimum security for other types of forensic training like search and recovery. Again, this is like a criminal justice school. It's a huge program, so that makes a lot of sense. They have a ton of webcams to monitor timing of post-mortem activities as well as like for security. So
interesting.
This may not be the one that we break into. There is a building on site that is designed by a morgue with a cooler and a freezer inside. There's morgue equipment and digital radiograph and microscope capabilities. It's kind of cool to have that like on site. This team also works on 3D scanning to better understand and estimate biological sex from fragmented pelvic remains, which is really cool.
Which is so interesting. The next one is Southern Illinois University. It's a complex. They call it the Complex for Forensic Anthropology Research. They opened their doors in October of 2010, and they work with pigs as human proxies. And remember, that isn't as weird as it sounds. It's actually fairly normal. Gretchen R. Dabbs and D.C. Martin built the facility to examine decomposition in the unique Southern Illinois environment. CFAR is what they call it. It has the lowest temp, highest average wind speed, and second lowest elevation with the most acidic soil and the worst soil drainage. So they have really specific climate and temperature conditions and wind speed and things like that. Also, this is one thing I want to note. At each of these places, they have a weather facility on site that will tell you like what the average temperature was the entire time that body was decomposing, which is so interesting because they can put them out in different seasons and things like that
Yeah.
to approximate like, oh, this is what it looks like in the fall in East Texas, or this is what it looks like, Southern Illinois during the winter. Super interesting. The first human donation was accepted there in January of 2012. The research focus here is establishing a baseline rate and pattern of decomposition and mimicking clandestine body disposal situations. So if someone is trying really hard to hide a body, that's what they're trying to mimic. They're also doing some really cool research about basically finding really well hidden bodies. It's also known for the study of, there's no way to say this without just getting gruesome, lawnmowers on skeletal remains, because the idea there came from a lawnmower actually running over the skeletal remains and the team being like, oh, yeah, I guess that could happen. We should study that.
I saw that too.
Yeah, I guess it can happen. It makes sense, but
Yeah, if someone was trying to conceal, like, imagine the situation where someone murdered someone, dropped them in a field, the field was purchased, and then a lawnmower was running over. And what would that do to the bones, and what could you then tell?
You have to know, right? They have to know.
Yeah.
They also work on bodies encased in concrete, which feels really creepy to me, but I have read so many cases where the chief suspect... Have you ever heard the podcast In Your Own Backyard?
No.
Okay, I cannot recommend that enough. It's about the case of Kristen Smart, which is like this sweet college girl who went missing. The main suspect, who's actually on trial right now, is accused basically of encasing her body in concrete because it's incredibly hard to find if they do that.
Oh, fuck. Okay. What a bitch.
So this is a thing that apparently people do, and they have to study that because people do it.
That's so gross. Stop doing that.
I know.
The next one is Colorado Mesa University. It's named the Forensic Investigation Research Station, and the facility is under the direction of Dr. Melissa Connor and Dr. Jessica Metcalf. Located outside of Whitewater, Colorado, the facility has the highest altitude, and it's the furthest west. It's like 4,780 feet above sea level.
That's really high, yeah.
That's really high, yeah. It has the most arid environment, which creates another unique research space, right? So,
yeah.
Because of the climate, most of the remains decompose quickly. So the research here focuses on that quickness with post-mortem intervals on mummified remains. I cannot say the word mummified without saying something else.
I guess it's so weird to think about, but I guess at that high an altitude, maybe mummification is something they have to worry about.
Yeah.
The next one is the University of South Florida, which has the USF Facility for Outdoor Research and Training as part of the Florida Institute for Forensic Anthropology and Applied Science, created by Aaron Kimmerly, who serves as the executive director. It has a 3.4-acre research lab outdoors using the USF Human Donations Program. The facility opened in September of 2018 and originally started with 5 bodies, serving as the only facility in a subtropical environment. The research here is incredibly important for that specific environment. With all of this research, again, I just want to hammer home, this allows for the research to basically transcend location and to be extremely important no matter where, especially in the continental United States, there is a need for this kind of information. So if you're hearing this and thinking, I want to donate my body, that's super cool. Procedures can vary from location to location, but you can self-select, like you can choose to do this and contact them in advance and say, when I die, I'm yours. Or you can deem a family member the decision maker in the U.S. In Canada, the facilities can access a body when a person has signed a form to carry that out after death. So locations depend. If you're interested in this, we'll include some links, but you should check into this for sure if you're interested.
Yeah. Unknown and unclaimed bodies have been accepted for donation in the U.S., which I still think is weird and wrong. Like, I really don't think that's the way we should go, but...
Yeah.
Body farms will reject a donation if the person has HIV, hepatitis, or an antibiotic-resistant bacteria. I don't love that. I don't know their reasoning. Maybe you know more.
Yeah.
You're the scientist. But I always feel weird when people do things, or when like facilities or like systems do things like that. Like, don't we need all types of research? Like, what if that interacts differently with the environment?
The only thing I can guess is that if they work with human tissues that have one of those things, they might need a higher level of biosafety clearance that may be hard to get.
Mm.
That's the only thing I can think of that would make that make sense.
All right. Well, there's opposition to the practice of body farms, obviously. I understand on the principle, but I think there's so much that can be learned that, it's ultimately like, if it's an individual's choice, then I think it's a really great thing. Obviously, we know about the worry around scavenging animals, but people have also claimed that they can see decomposing bodies from their homes, which, yeah, I understand you're upset about that. I believe I'd be upset about that,
Yeah, I think
too.
I'd go ahead and be upset about that. It's not an ideal situation for sure to see
Yeah, we don't love
decomposing
it.
bodies.
We don't
And
love
I think a lot of these facilities do try to put them in really rural locations with that in mind. So then the last thing we want to talk about is kind of how they've contributed to science and medicine, and they absolutely have. Starting with science, the way in which body farms have influenced the understanding of body decomposition obviously has allowed for scientists to be expert witnesses in criminal proceedings versus before they knew this information, it was people who had relatively limited training going in and doing their best approximation.
Yeah.
Jennifer De Bruyne, for example, is a microbial ecologist who studies the body's impact on the environment at the Tennessee Body Farm. De Bruyne and her team have helped narrow down 2 potential bacterial organisms. One of them is Bacteroides, and the other one is Lactobacillus, which offer the potential for consistent cycles and rates during decomposition. They're looking at a couple of really specific bacterial organisms to see how those interact with a decomposing body, which is super cool. De Bruyne hopes this area of research has the potential to narrow down the possible window of death even more. So, in the face of variations from climate, water, variance in individual metabolic decomposition rates, and potential scavengers, they can eliminate some of that variability to look at these specific organisms and see how far along they are in the decomposition process. Because if you've ever listened to a true crime show of any kind, time of death is always one of the key factors, because if you can place a person with the person who died at their exact time of death, it's a lot harder to get out of.
Yeah, then you got that motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. Researchers have also developed better time of death estimates based on the gases being emitted from the body. So, like we were talking about earlier, in that sort of decomposition process, lots of gases are released that participates in that like bloat phase, which are released in a really particular pattern over time. So it'll be like one set of bacteria comes in first and they start the decomposition process and they're releasing a specific gas. And then maybe a different bacteria comes in and they release a different gaseous byproduct. And so you can see like a second wave of a different gas being produced, which can help you narrow down, depending on how far along they are in that process, it can help you narrow down almost exactly when they died, which is amazing. And since they now know what type of chemicals are released from the body, especially during that like the purge phase, which is about 3 days post-death, they can use different tests to determine where those chemicals are. So they can even be used to find a missing body. Like what they're looking for now is infrared cameras that specifically detect those chemicals attached to drones that can fly over an area and say like, oh, the person was last seen in this area. So maybe a drone can fly over the area and look even in a very like well camouflaged area where those specific chemicals might be, which is honestly amazing.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Medical practice has also been influenced. Each stage of death has the ability to be analyzed and understood. Medical professionals can determine insects and climate decomposition, pointing out how the breakdown and leaching of human proteins and bacteria out into the soil can help pinpoint time of death and questions regarding the climate at the scene of the death. Also, one Australian scientist, Alison Wilson, recently discovered that human bodies can like move around significantly for up to a year after death, which is really
kind of stressful.
Strange. Yeah, she basically found that as ligaments and things dry out, they can cause this movement, and that's super important because it can help prevent investigators from misinterpreting a crime scene if they know about how, for instance, limbs can move while the body is decaying.
Yeah, in this one, she was looking at a body and they had pinned the arms down to the side, and she saw like movement on her camera, and she's like, what is that? And the arms basically came up like as the ligaments were drying, it like pulled the arms into like an almost T position, which is really weird.
I would be so scared. I would never be. You're never going to hear.
It's all
absolutely not.
Really crazy and interesting, and I just find this stuff so fascinating. Got anything else?
Oh, I did want to add, these research spaces, they help science, they help for like investigations, and they also help people like Lisa Gardner, who's an author. She was working on a murder for her next novel, like writing about this murder. And she says, quote, I had originally planned on having the body in my novel burned in order to make identifying it impossible. But after discovering that such an act would never fool a forensic anthropologist, I spent the next 2 days frantically trying to come up with a new ploy. So basically she actually went
right
and like spoke to people there, and she's like, oh, this wouldn't work. So the research is there like for everyone.
Yeah, it's not just scientists, it's authors, historians, etc. Everybody wants to know how people die.
What happens when you die? Yeah.
Got anything else?
And that's what we know about that.
Yeah, that's what we know about body farms. We hope you like this episode as much as we did. This was fun to put together.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Cool.
If you have a recommendation for us, hit us up on our social medias, Malpractice Podcast, or email us, malpracticepodcast@gmail.com.
Don't forget to leave us a review wherever you listen.
Yeah.
We love to read your reviews, and we love to interact with you. So don't forget to follow us on social media. And don't forget, malpractice makes perfect.
Bye.
Bye-bye.